Right, good evening, members. May as well get started. For the meeting of Select Committee, it's Wednesday, the 17th of February. We have agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies for absence from Councillors Sutcliffe and Mercer. If you don't mind, I'll take a quick roll call.
Yep, fire away, Hannah.
Starting with yourself, you're here, Councillor Staveley. Councillor Brockbank.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I'm here.
Councillor Hull.
Present. Present.
Councillor Jacquin.
Yeah.
Present.
Councillor Morby.
Present.
Councillor Shuttleworth.
Present.
Councillor Soloway.
Present.
Thank you. That's it, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of September 2020. Seems such a long time ago. Have we got a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'll propose them, Chairman.
Right, we've got a proposal from
I'll
Tolway.
second them, Chairman.
Right, thank you very much. So that's that done. Right, public participation. We have, I believe, just one member of the public of a fashion, a fellow councillor, the chair of Sturton with Thorby Parish, Councillor Karen Darville, who would like to address the committee. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Councillor Darville, and then fire away.
Thank you. Good evening. I know that Hannah very kindly has forwarded some information for you to look at, which is my supports my request for scrutiny. I think is the official terminology. And if you don't mind, I won't go over any of that detail again, as you've already had it. But I just wanted to bring attention to the matter that I have a concern about. I can't offer insights on whether my experience is typical, and you may find some of the response times that I've put down as examples fully acceptable. It would be interesting to know what other councils have as a policy for response times from within the team. And just to be clear, I'm talking about communications which are sent directly to officers, not to the customer service team, because I know that you already monitor and report on the performance for the customer service team. But then another concern that I had in speaking to customer service when trying to track down something that had gone missing, once they have forwarded an email or an inquiry onto another department, they have no further dealings with that. They don't check whether that inquiry has been responded to and in what time frame. This, I also wanted to say, this isn't a pandemic situation. It's not. I'm bringing this to your attention because in the last 12 months there's been a particular problem. Councillor Sutcliffe raised this on my behalf in 2018, and it's taken this long to get an audience. So the issue predates that. If any of you think this experience that I've outlined could be improved, and there might be more appetite for dealing with that than there was in 2018 when Councillor Sutcliffe was told there wasn't any interest in introducing anything like a monitoring system or KPIs, then I just wondered whether it would be timely, because the improvement plan includes this issue of communication for the planning department, whether that could be extended to other departments within the council, so that we, as a member of the public, have an idea about what the council's policy is on response times. The other angle of this is, I feel, a great deal of sympathy for those people who are perhaps struggling just to get through the volume of communications that they have and just can't cope with it. I think we've probably all been there, but how I wonder, because it's not monitored, I wonder if how the council knows whether there is anything to do to support those officers who might just be inundated with communication. And so it's really just bringing all those things together and asking you to consider that from a public's point of view, and as I say, it might just be mine, whether those response times are what you want the public to be experiencing, and if not, whether you could consider expanding the improvements that have been outlined in the peer review report to other departments. And also, if you have any questions, then I'd be happy to answer them if I can at this point.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Darrell. I mean, it might just be, you know, your individual experience. I don't know who you've upset, but I can see
everyone, no doubt.
there's obviously a broader picture here. We are discussing our work programme, agenda item 7. Clearly tonight, we just be yourself as a member of the public or member of the parish council as it goes to present your requests. I think I'm minded that we will discuss this a little bit further, if that's okay with members. When we look at our work programme, I think initially it may be a case of us having a one-off meeting to look at what can be done and then taking it forward from there. But as I say, we can discuss that further, agenda item 7. And then, as I say, if we do go forward with the meeting, we may invite you back. So, you know, you might have opened Pandora's box here, I'm afraid. But careful what you wish for. We will discuss it further, agenda item 7. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. If you see me disappear from the meeting, it's because I've got another one to go to, but thank you very much for giving me the time to speak so far.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Yeah, could I ask?
Have I got somebody wanting to speak? Councillor Shuttleworth.
Found my blue hand.
Yes, I've just spotted it as you as I was about to get it.
Right, fine, yeah. What's a KPI? Pardon my ignorance.
Key performance indicator.
Key, right, that's it. I managed the PI. I'd lost the K. Thank you.
It's a measurement of air pressure as well, but that's to do with my profession, and I assume it's a different thing to this. Right, so we've no other members wanting to know any of the acronyms that we were using there, so that's good. Item 4, declarations of interest, members. Have we got any declarations of interest on the items on tonight's agenda? I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say that's a no. Right, thank you very much. Right, so on to item 5, absent management 2021, and that's for, I believe it'd be Sharon will be presenting this. Would that be correct? No, who have we got in here tonight?
It's Jackie Hodgson, who's
Jackie Hodgson,
your HR manager.
Who's noticeable by her absence.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good evening, everybody. I'm here to present the absence management report, which is from April to September 2020. The target that we set for the 6 months to September 2020 for the number of days lost per FTE was 4.25 days. The actual number of days that we lost per FTE was 2.7, which is 50% below the target. There has been a 52% decrease in days lost per FTE compared to the same period of last year.
Can everybody hear Jackie? Sorry, is that loud and clear? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fairly clear, Paul. She just disguised herself as Paul Shevlin, CDC, which was where the confusion came from. Clearly.
Okay.
Yeah. Just speak up, and we should be fine.
Okay. So on the next page, it gives you the days lost per FTE for previous 5 years between April and September. The graph shows there that is from April to September. As already noticed, total absence has increased each year until this year. Short-term absence has fallen each year, although it was slightly higher last year. Short-term absence has decreased by 45% compared with last year. Long-term absence has increased each year for the past 3 years and has been on average 72% of the total. Long-term absence was at the highest last year, reaching 854.2 days lost per FTE, but has dropped to 394 days this year. As we're all aware, the long-term absence is any absence for a continuous period of 4 weeks. So When you look at that, it has decreased by 54% compared to the same time last year. And this was 7 employees that had long-term absences between April and September, compared with 17 in the period of last year. There were 3 employees with stress-related illnesses, all from one service area. And I have to stress that this was social stress. It wasn't work-related. And this can be social stress is described as things like relationship breakdowns, deaths in families, and all that sort of thing. Sometimes, so you can get work-related stress, which can be times when people are going through procedures and they just need a little bit of help. So to date, we don't have anybody on long-term sickness, so all the long-term sickness is now completed. However, you don't know going forward, you never know. So that gives you the breakdown on the next page. Point 5, which is the Oasis counselling. This has been really well received, in particular through the pandemic. Lots of people have been accessing it. I've bought some more. What happens is staff have 4 sessions with a counsellor, and that can be, at the moment, obviously it's over the telephone or in a Zoom call or a Teams call. And sometimes the counsellors will ring me up. We never find out who it is, and just say that they have somebody there that possibly needs more sessions. We're not counsellors, so obviously we go and go by them. Again, I've just purchased the 12 credits for that. Item 6 is a short-term absence. Again, if you look at the pie chart there, stress and depression again features there. Again, these were not work related at all. But back to work interviews are carried out by line managers, and that comes from if you have a day off sick, if you have 2 days off sick, or any days at all off sick. Everybody has to go through that procedure, and in there we tease things out of people as to find out whether or not there is something there, an underlying reason as to being off sick. Was it stress, etc. And where necessary, we will get the occupational health involved to help us on that one. Item 7 there gives you the absence by service area, and you can see there from the levels of where we were. And you like to have the absence and waste management separately, so that is item 8 for you. And there's your graphs there again coming down. Again, the short-term absence again featured stress and musculoskeletal issues. Again, that can be. We had a few people that had some operations, so again, people do not recover quickly, especially in waste management. They have to have the full time off. But we do try and bring people back into the office, and it could be that they can work in business support, or they can work in the back office within waste management. We do try so that they are back to work as soon as possible, and as soon as it's safe for them. Again, we go by what the doctor says. Again, we're not doctors, so we don't know. We've then given you something, item 9 on COVID. I feel personally that we've been very, very lucky with this. Obviously, because people have had to shield. We have had, at the time of this report, we had 7 people that tested positive. Fortunately for them and for us, they weren't very, very ill with it and didn't need to go into the hospital. And I do believe, and I think we all truly believe, that because of when the pandemic first hit and we all decided that we had to work from home, it was sort of like an overnight success for us, because people went home and worked from home, thus stopping the spread of COVID. We're also now having temperature checks and various other sorts of checks for people, again, so that we can try and get on top of it if anything happens. And I have to say as well that business support have been absolutely brilliant during this period of time, because staff have been out and obviously working from home. So what they've been doing is they've been printing stuff off for us, they've been posting things. And again, a lot of people couldn't have done what they have done without the help from business support team and IT as well. IT have been great as well with that, setting everything up for us, and also allowing us to take chairs if people needed a decent chair to sit on. We've been allowed to come in and get as much equipment as possible to help us work from home. So The next, all the appendices are there. The appendices are there that you like to see, that you've requested for in the past. In particular, the Appendix 4, which is the absence by service area. That's all there for you as well. So I'm happy if anybody's got any questions.
Hi, members. Have we got any virtual hands to go at? I've got Councillor Hull and then Councillor Brown. I'd like to unmute yourself, Councillor Hull, and then Councillor Brockman.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'm just intrigued, really. Obviously, the period you're covering, April to September, and as you've already highlighted, it included people learning to work from home, if you like. That's the way of putting it. I'm therefore, in a way, not surprised that a lot of your stats have reduced. And I'm just wondering, what is the protocol for actually reporting, if you like, minor illness? Do you think there's an underreporting as a consequence of that? Or are people being as strict, although they're not coming into the office? I'm also intrigued to know, perhaps there is no average on this, but what number of staff have been in the offices during that period that you're looking at now?
Okay. Right, well, line managers are in touch with all their staff, and they do it on, some do it on a daily basis, some people do it on a weekly basis. We have huddles where there's a Zoom meeting, so, and the one-to-one meeting. So unless people are actually telling us that they are feeling ill, we don't know. It is quite difficult. However, I'd like to think that we know our staff. And when you look at the illnesses that have been coming in, they are things that they probably would have been off with anyway. So I suppose if somebody's got maybe a headache or a touch of a bit of a cold, they possibly wouldn't have come in, but they can work from home. So it's quite difficult to capture. But again, it is all about the communication with your staff member. As for how many members of staff are coming in, I would say on an average in Bellevue, there's generally 3 or 4 on our floor. There may be 4 on the floor below, and because reception's not open, obviously there's nobody in there. So it's very, very limited to people that are coming.
And our individuals deciding which days to go in. I think what I'm trying to get to is, and obviously it'd be interesting to see the April for the rest of the financial year, September to the end of the financial year, is we don't want to hold ourselves hostage to fortune here, where the stats have dropped dramatically, but actually it's been about different ways of working rather than illness having been seriously reduced, if you like. See what I'm trying to say?
I think the key thing is that some staff actually want to call in every now and then into work, and it's about working with your line manager, and they will arrange with the line manager what date is appropriate, what day of the week is appropriate, whether it's a couple of hours, whether it's afternoon, whether it's a day. And then because we don't want an overflow of staff within Bellevue Square, we've made that very clear that if we can keep the levels, and I'd suggest at the moment we're below 10% of staff that are actually coming into Bellevue. But for those who want to, and some have a clear preference to, I can think of 1 or 2 staff in particular, and that's fine, we can accommodate that. So what we're trying to do is work with the staff to get the solutions, and actually from the stats that you've seen, I think they've worked. The only other thing I'll add is that from next week, we'll be introducing lateral flow devices for testing for COVID at Engine Shed Lane, or it isn't Engine Shed Lane now, of course, it is Airedale Business Park, where the waste management operate from. And that's from next week that will be put in place. The temperature monitoring is already in place, and this is the next step for one of the crucial services and potentially exposed service as well.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Right, if that's Wendy, just a point, members, the term silver lining will be frowned upon if anybody decides to try using it, because obviously we've got some favourable figures here in terms of staff absenteeism, but I think we know what's going on. So just point that one out. I know others have fallen foul of using that phrase in the last week or two. Councillor Brown.
4 points, but all of them fairly quick, hopefully. Firstly, this business about COVID and working from home, and those statistics are very promising, or kind of less bad than we feared, whatever. Interesting to compare it with the college experience. It's been much higher at the college, where staff have had to go in on many occasions, and with similar size of workforce, much more dramatic impact. Second point I wanted to make is absences in waste management have gone down, and those staff are in and working physically. I think one of the things that we have to say is I think that's down to the public telling them they've appreciated what they've done. It's a lot nicer to go into work when people have kind of responding positively to what you've done, and we probably need to think about that and build on that and make sure they get the positive feedback in the future, as well as the brickbacks they inevitably get of "you've missed me, am I too late?" If anybody thinks back to my old man's endorsement. Third thing to do is customer services. I just want to ask whether 2 team members left after a restructure. Was that, I mean, there's 2 possible ways of interpreting that. One is that the restructure was brilliant and actually got things efficient and people didn't like them being efficient. And the other is the restructure was clumsy and difficult and we lost some experienced members of staff. I think we should at least test out which of those it is and have some understanding of that. And the other thing I wanted to say is a similar point, really. The long-term illness where 3 with stress went from the same service. Now, I mean, I hear the point that this is social stress, if you like, but my experience of dealing with stress is it's never put in a box. It never is just one thing. There are many multiple contributory factors, and it seems one hell of a coincidence that we've got 3 members of staff off from one section. Is there a problem in that section, or is it genuinely just a coincidence? I'll comment on all the things that Karen said later in the meeting.
In terms of customer services, it was actually the latter, not the former. It was damn well managed. It was managed through, and actually it's resulted in a more efficient service that we've got. The staff didn't leave under a cloud. The staff didn't leave because they didn't enjoy the environment anymore. On the contrary, it was very well managed all the way through. So I have no qualms about that. Sharon might want to comment on that because she was, at the centre of it in many respects. In terms of the public welcoming the refuse collection staff, yeah, absolutely right. I think it did have a very positive effect. But what also had a positive effect was the way that absenteeism was being managed as well. And that is important. And it's what Jackie related to in terms of the process that you go through if you've had time off. And that needs to be implemented all the time in all the services. And where we had high levels of absence at some stages, it's very important that it is managed very effectively. And I can assure you in waste management, it certainly was. Jackie, do you want to add anything about the three off with stress?
Yeah, again, they were social stress, and when somebody comes and tells us that they've got that, I explore that. It's not just taking their word for it. I would sit down with them and go through various questions with them. They would then go to occupational health. They've then got the Oasis counselling system that they can use as well. And what happens, you find that is something happens within their family or within their life, and they can't cope with that. So they come to work and they can't cope with work because of what's going on with their life. And that's where you then have to try to be very clever to try and find out and pick out how you can help people. And I'd like to think that we do help people as best we can.
I think Councillor Brown particularly wanted to pick up on 3 people from the same service.
Oh, sorry, but well, that was from that service. That they all had different. I can't really tell you because it would identify these people. Again, if somebody's got an illness, that can get you down. and it is a combination of a lot of things, and it does take a lot of not hard work, that's the wrong word. It does take time trying to drill down to find out exactly what's going on, so that we can help them and help them come back to work. Either it be on a part-time basis until they feel well enough to work again full-time, or again a phased return, or putting them somewhere else into a different environment. But there was nothing untoward with the three, if that helps.
Right. Is that everything, Councillor Brown? You happy with that? Right, thank you. Councillor Brockbank, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's regarding working from home. We have an arrangement where members can, if they experience difficulties working from home, be it broadband or just the physical, being able to have a quiet area where they can work, or when they're using video conferencing, they can have a quiet area. We did experience on Monday, and we have experienced this before in planning committee, and I don't know how common this is in other committees, but in planning committee we have some rather big files, and some of the officers are experiencing connection problems, and I'm just wanting to know, is there perhaps we could consider those officers whose broadband isn't perhaps as good as it needs to be for video conferencing. Should we consider having for committee meetings, or for some committee meetings, having officers come into Bellevue and being able to conduct the meeting from Bellevue, where obviously Bellevue has got much better broadband connection?
Councillor Brockbank, they have that option now. It's simply, just as members we'll arrange, Guy fixed up, they can have a room, separate room, isolated. Officers can do that now, so that's not an issue.
Okay, thank you for that.
Right, I mean, I attended the planning meeting on Monday, and I think that's least of your worries, but anyway, yeah, I mean, we did mention at the start, when councillors were trying to grapple their way around this issue of broadband speeds and connections and so on, the idea of perhaps IT getting a little bit more proactive in assessing what everybody had to offer in terms of their home broadband. Could I ask, do IT do a similar sort of process for officers where it may be deemed necessary, or across all offices?
Yeah, yes, we do. All people have to do is, all staff have to do is to ring in to the IT service, and they will help. I mean, I know when I've had a problem with my laptop when I've been at home, all I've done is ring the number, and they've been there at the end of the phone talking me through what I have to do, etc. So yeah, there is that facility available for everybody.
I was thinking something a little bit more proactive, as in IT actually go out of their way to contact individual members of staff, particularly in the key areas, to sort of go through a process of trying to assess if there's an issue before it becomes an issue. Because clearly, some people do struggle more than others, members and officers. Councillor Hull now conducts her business lower in her mansion because it's closer to the router, I believe. So, for example, and Councillor Brockbank, I don't know what we're going to do with you, but anyway, it is something that I think we need to get right, because it's not going away, isn't this? And obviously, I think everybody's getting very comfortable with the idea of working from home, and there's a lot of positives to it, but we need to make sure that the IT isn't a flaw. And I just think that, if IT can find the resource to do it and quietly go through and just do a checklist of everybody that they think's needing it. I don't know, one for the suggestion box then, perhaps?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, service managers have actually done this with the teams already.
Right. So it has been done.
I think we've been pretty proactive in terms of that.
Right. I mean, I know there's a habit of sort of locking IT away in a dark room somewhere and leaving them to play World of Warcraft until you need them. But it's important that we do sort of try and get ahead of the game. Right, members, and Councillor Soloway has his virtual hand up. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Andy, please.
Chairman, I'm very intrigued by the appearing success of working from home, and I know you did caution us about silver lining. I'm not even going to go there. First of all, I'd like to really commend this Oasis Counselling, which seems to be doing an extremely good job, and I think is very much money well spent on counselling staff and bringing them back into work. I think that's wonderful. I think we supported it at the time from this committee. I'd just like to ask a question. Has maybe the success of working from home been driven by quite other dynamics? I mean, if you take people out of offices, you take them away from, for want of a better word, office politics or office comfort. They're actually happier working at home, so they're more productive. They've also taken them away from what possibly could be in some other offices. I'm not saying it happens at Craven District, where there's the water cooler effect, where so people are kind of more productive in their work. I certainly, as a councillor, as a member, have not noticed any decline. In fact, I've noticed almost an improvement in people getting back to me, people getting onto an issue that I've raised with them. Even though people are working from home, I think it's been a really positive benefit. I've not noticed anything really changing for the negative at all. I'd just like to sort of pick brains from an HR point of view, whether that may be a factor as well. There's some people aren't comfortable in an office environment. They'd like to work on their own. They're much more independent workers. That's myself.
Yeah, we find that as well. I mean, we encouraged everybody, all line managers, to contact staff to make sure that they were okay. We put out some tips for people that were working from home, tips for managers to how to manage people that were working from home. And if people want to come in, they can come in, because there is enough room. Some services have put a rota in so that people can come in, so that there's never the same two people in at the same time. And I don't get any calls. In fact, I can't remember the last time I had a call from somebody saying that they were unhappy at working from home. Everybody seems to have settled into it really, really well. People that have had to homeschool, they've been very appreciative of it, because it means that they can homeschool their children and work as well, and take it in turns with the partners, etc. So we've had a lot of laughs about that. Oh, it's his turn to do it, or my turn to do it, etc. And I generally feel that staff are a lot happier, because they have, freedom's not the right word, but that they have that freedom, I suppose, to come in, and as long as the work's done and everybody's happy, etc., and the line managers are managing, everything seems to have run really well. But I do think it was the way that we did it from the very, very beginning.
And I think it's also saying that, we've had a number of all staff events. We always split them, so there'll be 2 in a day to cover the same topics. Whether they've been on COVID, local government reorganisation, general catch-ups, they've been important. And I've got to say, I think Zoom actually facilitates that really well. We did a virtual Christmas event with the staff, which was the awards ceremony, which was a bit of a challenge, but we did it. And we're going the next step, which is a curry cooking night, using a local expert in this field, so that again, it's about that team is still part of Craven. We still want you to feel part of Craven, and that's so important to take us forward. And this won't last forever, although I think a lot more staff will be working from home on a lot more frequent basis. I think that pattern is now set for the future.
Just come back on that, because I mean, if there's a couple of occasions where I've sat there on a Sunday and thought, right, I'll email someone so that they pick it up on Monday morning. Well, let me if they don't pick it up on Sunday. It's because, and I mean, I'm not saying that they should, but often they do because they've got that flexibility. They might not want to pick that email up on Monday because they're homeschooling their kids. I fully respect that, and I think that's been a positive benefit. People have been able to work around their own timescales.
Perhaps your Sunday service might not be so good once people haven't watched Netflix back to back and they've got something else to do on a Sunday, but you never know. Councillor Brockbank, could you have your unmuted microphone and your hand down, please, and ask your question?
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any, do you have core times with people working at home? Do you have core times that they need to be logged on?
That depends on the service managers, in all fairness, because what was decided was that, again, because people have their children at home, if for example you can't get your child to nursery, people were logging on and working when the baby was asleep, or when the husband or the partner had come home, and taking it in turns. So we are very structured. Things are getting done. But the core times are normally, you have to be in by 10 till 12, and then 2 till 4. That went out the window with quite a few things where people were having to like I say, look after children, look after aging parents, etc. So as long as the work is done, and we've had no issues, it's up to the service managers to manage that.
But obviously there are some services where we've got to cover those times. You know, you've got customer services next. Actually, people will phone between 9 and 5, let's say, and we have to have that covered. So that is managed in a slightly different way. And, you know, but I've got to say the staff have reacted really well on that service to working from home as well. So it's been a positive experience. I think the biggest complaint we got when we did the first survey, and we've just done a follow-up survey as well, was somebody actually said, I haven't got a comfortable chair to work from at home. I said, well, take your office one. Not an issue, take your office one. So that's what they did. They took the office chair in order to be comfortable at home. So we've also learned that we are flexible in order to try and get the best to support the staff, because it is a challenge. It was a challenge, especially initially.
I'm glad you mentioned chairs, because I was actually going to ask this. Is there a procurement possibility for members of staff, if they cared to get hold of the relevant office equipment through ourselves at our more favourable buying terms, up their home office?
No. Normally, if it is something that you need and you're there on a fairly permanent basis, it has been supplied by IT.
Right.
I'm not aware. I think the only element you can get cheaper is the Microsoft software, and that's for personal use.
Yeah,
and that's part of the contract we've got, so you can be involved in that. But there's not been a need as yet to buy into anything else. If that crops up, we'll certainly look at it. I won't guarantee what the outcome is at this moment in time, though, Councillor Stabler.
No, I'm just mindful that a lot of people may be thinking initially it might be temporary, but then it's looking a bit more permanent, and the kitchen table doesn't always offer the best option, and perhaps things may change as they move along. I mean, it doesn't matter for councillors because we don't sort of have to do that much, but if you're working 8 hours a day, it's a different matter, isn't it? Entirely. I'd hate to think we were going to get musculoskeletal problems and people being sat in bad chairs. It might undo your next set of figures, but anyway.
They were all asked to do their own little risk assessment as well. And that's been part and parcel of working from home. So yeah. We tried to cover that one off as well, so that we're not leaving ourselves liable as employers.
I've just noticed Councillor Solway just messaged everybody in the group with the very same comment. Great minds, obviously, at work here. Right then, members. Councillor Jacqueline, Councillor Morby, have you got any comments to make on this report? Or no, shaking of heads. Right. So, thank you very much indeed. I think we'll leave it at that and move on to the next item, which is definitely Sharon this time. I'm going to stick my neck out. Right, fair play. Over to you, Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Staveley. I'll quickly run through the report. Interestingly, the first section of the report, I talked about the impact of COVID on the customer service team. So we're very proud of the fact that we were able to set up the team to work remotely from home with no problems, because we had in February last year done a business continuity exercise where we relocated the contact centre to the town hall and had laptops set up. So it meant when we had to work from home, we were all set to go. So currently 5 of the 17 members are working from home, and this has been very popular actually with the team. And just to relate back to the report that Jackie presented on absence management, we've noticed in customer service that our sickness levels have actually gone down, and in particular with an individual who had a poorer absence record than others, and I think it's really suited her working from home. So 2 members of the team have remained working within Bellevue Square. 1 has no internet access, so wouldn't be able to work from home and has no desire to have Wi-Fi installed at home. And the other member of staff lives alone, and she asked if she could continue to come into the office for her mental health more than anything. So I'm pleased that we were able to accommodate that. And because of the space there is within Bellevue Square, everyone can work in a socially distanced way very easily. It's not an issue. In regards to the reception, it was made COVID safe when we reopened after the first lockdown. Full risk assessments were carried out, screens are installed, and procedures put in place, but it is currently closed in the 3rd lockdown, and then hopefully when we get the roadmap for reopening, the country will be open to the reception again. We've advertised on our website the fact that the reception area is closed. We've put social media posts. If anyone does come to the reception area, there's a telephone number to ring that goes through to someone in business support, so they can either make an appointment if someone really does need to speak to someone face to face, or we can encourage them to do it online or via the telephone. And we've not had any issues in terms of following that process. It's worked quite smoothly actually. And in terms of setting up an appointment for someone, it's been used very little during the complete lockdown periods. In terms of staffing, so we haven't had a restructure within customer services as much in the last year. We have, however, had a sort of mini restructure with business support, with the view of more closely aligning the business support and customer service teams to give us a bit more flexibility in terms of how we run the service. So last year we recruited 2 apprentices, and they were trained to provide cover for customer services as well during busy times, and in particular on the phone and on reception. And we found in the last billing period, last March, one of those officers came and worked on the telephones, and she really embraced having that opportunity. And in fact, she was set up to work from home. We kept in close touch with her all the way through, because it's quite a daunting task for her, and she coped incredibly well. And that added more resilience to the service. And then likewise, when customer service isn't so busy and business support have got more admin work to do, we can provide cover for that service as well. And it's enabled us to drive out significant savings in both services. And in fact, when a member of the customer service team retired last year, we replaced that post with a joint post shared with business support to provide more flexibility across both services. And I think that is the way to do it in the future, really. So I listed the savings made. In terms of performance, during 2019-2020, we hit the 90% call handling target, and we are on track to meet the same target in this year, 2021. I do recognise the fact that we have had more resource in terms of staff to answer the telephones because of reception being closed, but it's a great achievement for the team. We've seen this year that call levels have largely plateaued, and we can see an increase in calls, particularly
when there's any announcement from the government, particularly at the beginning of lockdown last year, there'd be a press conference and then people will be ringing customer services the next day asking for more information, which did put quite a lot of pressure on the team because, they could explain, we've all heard about this at the same time as everyone else, but it's like quickly prepare briefings for them so they were ready to share that with anyone who would call into the service. And likewise, when there's been any grant announcements, there's been huge numbers of calls to the teams about grants and repeated calls from businesses who understandably quite anxious, desperate to find out more how they can apply and receive the grants. So we've seen that impact during the year. We've seen a huge increase in email traffic during the course of the year, and I think that is a direct result of the pandemic. In terms of the service we deliver, the customer service team have actually been utilised to make calls to residents who are clinically extremely vulnerable, working with North Yorkshire County Council. When the shielding list was first introduced, which people are now classed as clinically extremely vulnerable, we made a lot of check-in calls with residents in Craven to check that they had support from friends and family, neighbours, or if they didn't, if they knew somewhere to go for support, we could put them in touch with the relevant community support organisation. If there was clear social care needs, then they would be referred to North Yorkshire County Council. So the team made thousands of calls to individuals in Craven, and we're carrying on with those now. And I fully expect, following the announcement yesterday about adding more people to the shielding register, there'll be more calls to come. So we actually utilised a member of the cultural services team, the tourist information manager, in the first lockdown. Because tourist information was closed, she was trained up to also answer calls in the contact centre, anything to do with community support. And she was also utilised in making these shielding calls, and she was set up to work from home. And she provided that service for 3 or 4 months, which was invaluable as well, and gave us a little bit more resilience in the team. So the appendix, there is the call performance monitoring report that we produce on a monthly basis, and that gets taken to the council leadership team once a quarter. So that's just an example of where we're at so far, and it gives you a breakdown of all the call handling stats and how the team are doing and the types of calls that the team are doing. So you'll have had a good overview in terms of the calls coming into customer service from that. Team meetings, we hold a regular team meeting, and we also set up, if you're talking about working from home, an informal WhatsApp group, because we recognise that because the team are all working from home, you miss out on those quick chats or a quick question that another member of the team can answer. So we use WhatsApp for that purpose. If you can just put a quick question and someone in the team who isn't on the telephone can answer it. And that's worked really, really well. And it's also enabled the 2 members of the team in the office to still feel connected in with the others who are working from home. So next year, planned service improvements. Regs and Bens were hoping to introduce citizens access on Northgate last year, so residents could log on to their own accounts and see information about change of address, setting up direct debits, but that unfortunately was put back due to COVID, and as was the waste management in-cab technology, so you could see where they were at in terms of bin collections, and again I think that was put back because of the pandemic. So that's something that we're hoping that will move forward in the next year. So I'm open to any questions that there may be.
Right, thank you, Sharon. You're not the only one who's got informal WhatsApp groups. Some of us also have in the Conservative group. But anyway, any questions, members? All volunteer at once, will you now? Councillor Brown, you've usually got something to say. I'm relying on you here. Go on, unmute yourself.
Well, primarily to say I'm actually comfortable with the report on that aspect of customer services. It all sounds, reasonable. No doubt you've got your difficulties, but it sounds like it's going fine. I think Karen Davell's issues that she raised at the start are the ones that are perhaps more interesting to me. Is what happens behind that immediate front of house service. So you get a good reception, you get sent on to somebody, and then I think I'm getting similar feedback to her about differential experiences of what happens further down the line. And certainly my own experience of that in one or two departments has been bizarre, I think. It's one that leads me to ask questions about whether lockdown and working from home is producing differential quality of service. I've got people responding to me, as Andy Soloway was relating, very quickly at weekends, next day answer. I've got other people where it takes 3 reminders to get an answer that ought to be fairly straightforward. And I'm speaking to members of the public of like chairs of planning of parish councils or members of parish councils who are relaying frustrations over not your aspect of the service. They're getting well dealt with that, well referred on, but they're then entering a kind of finding the experience of something of a whole in areas of the service where we all know we've got some challenges, particularly planning.
I know this issue was raised, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and I think the difficulty is each service has its own systems and way of monitoring. There isn't a uniform system across the whole of the council, and it would be impossible realistically to put something in place like that. So I know, for example, with environmental health, we're very clear when anyone calls to register, I don't know, fly tipping or an issue, that it will be logged on the environmental health system, which is IDOCS, and then their service standards is they will respond within 5 days. So, for example, environmental health are very clear in their service standards and their response times. I don't know if that is the same across every service in the council, and maybe that's something that does need to be considered in terms of working with service managers. They establish what is a reasonable, realistic response time, and then we can publish those on the website. I think at the moment the issue you have is each service delivers its own service, and it is the responsibility of the service manager.
Right. I mean, Sharon, we're going to deal with this issue that's been raised by Councillor Darvill, obviously in the work programme. Could I ask if you'd be patient enough to just wait and stick around for that when we come to that? So we will look at how we can respond to that request as well. I've got now. Councillor Brown's got his hand up again. Is it on another matter? Or is it,
sorry, I misunderstood that I thought you were trying to deal with it at this item, and my apologies.
Yeah, it's okay. Apology accepted. Right, Councillor Solway, then Councillor Hull.
Actually going to come in on another issue, but actually it does, Andy Brown makes a good point that if we are looking to do a review of this, that information as to different levels of kind of service agreement would be quite useful to have when we have our first look at it. I'm just also interested to know whether something like environmental health actually have statutory targets for getting back on certain things because they're environmental. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Whereas other departments may not. I mean, I know that when I'm dealing with North Yorkshire Highways, they have a statutory response time of 20 days. It's often quicker than that, but sometimes they stretch it to 20 days. So that would be useful to us if we do decide to go this route. I was going to ask a question though, separately too, because you raise the issue that of the extra 1.7 million people who have been classed as clinically vulnerable and shielding, and we have had various people inquiring about that. Almost a question I should have asked head of HR. Has that impacted on us as a council? Have we had those extra people having to, people who had to work, couldn't work from home? Has that impacted on us? I don't know. Maybe it's a question for the wrong person.
I don't think we know yet. Those individuals are due to be written to this week. I think for some, it might be, I don't know if it'll be a surprise or if it's something that they would necessarily expect, depending on this personal circumstances. So I think it's difficult to say right now in terms of what impact it's going to have in terms of staffing at CDC, but I'm sure, I think as Jackie gone, I know what the policy was the first time around with Shield. You know, if an individual needed to shield and work from home, then that's what they had to do. And if they weren't able to work from home, say if it was a refuse collector and there was no way of finding something for them to do at home when they weren't doing the day-to-day job, and then they had to stay at home. I think maybe Paul should comment on that, because this is not my area of expertise.
And it's interesting, the new regulations which have been issued today, which go along with the new shielding, the employer has a duty to actually make sure that the member of staff stays at home and isolates. It's a slightly different approach from the first time round, and that's because of the extension, as you say, to the 1.7 million. But you're absolutely right. The letters, as far as I'm aware, haven't gone out yet. They're about to, so we don't know if any of our staff will receive a letter. And whilst we know some of the criteria, clearly it's an algorithm of some variety which the government have used on medical advice to generate this list as well, and we don't have access to that.
Right. Andy, is that okay?
Yeah, well, sorry. My point was also about sort of it in preparation for maybe doing this review. If we choose to do so later on, that information on different service level response times would possibly be useful to maybe start getting hold of, I think.
There is a target time for all correspondence, which applies to all the services. So that is already in place. Don't ask me to tell you what it is, because I can never remember, but because I answer as quickly as I can, of course.
3 working days, Paul.
Sorry?
3 working days to respond.
Yeah, so that is already in place. So, you know, I think as Sharon has pointed out, the services do vary, and there are peak times when the services won't meet the targets. And I'll give environmental health as an example at the moment, because they're under severe pressure because of the extra work they've got to do, totally COVID related, and every aspect, whether it be advice, enforcement, whatever. So they really are pulled out in that direction. So they don't meet their targets. I must admit, I prefer them to be doing the COVID work at this moment in time, because that's the immediate problem we've got. And that's where we should be putting our resources to help businesses and the public out there and stop the spread.
Right. Councillor Hull, would you like to mute yourself, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sharon, you made reference to obviously the volume of businesses bringing in about grants, etc. I was just wondering how the interface with the finance team worked, whether they had people in the offices or whether there was any delay in trying to get through to the right person to deal with that business query. Because I know the volume on both your team and the finance team was overwhelming. I'm just intrigued to know whether that worked well.
No, it did work well. We tried to deal with as many queries as we could in the contact centre. We had regular updates from Deborah Davis in terms of what was happening with administering the grants, because they had, you know, in terms of they had short time frames to put schemes in place, advertise, and then administer them. And so we had regular updates as to where they were at with the grant payments, with the schemes, and then we could produce a briefing for the team so they had the information that they could give to individuals. We also did a lot of work on social media. So the minute a scheme opened, we would advertise it on social media, share it to all the community groups as well, to get the message out far and wide. There was a unique email address set up to email the Revs and Bens team about any queries to do with the business grants, and that also worked well. So I think it has worked well, and I've had anecdotal feedback from people who've received the grants who've been very impressed by the quick way that the CDC's turned the grants around, and in terms of the communication as well. So I would say it worked well. And in fact, we've got a team meeting with customer services tomorrow, so we've got the latest update in terms of what's happening with the next round of discretionary grants that we can share with the team. I think the only frustration comes is when a scheme isn't open, or someone's not necessarily got the correct information, and their expectations are raised, and that can be a difficult call for the customer service advisor, because they're not necessarily given the information the individual calling actually wants. But I think the team have done really well, actually, and I think it's worked well, the links we've got with Revs and Ben's service.
Okay, that's great. As I understand it, internal audit might be looking at the grant process. I think it'd be useful if they picked up, you know, your side of the story as well. I think that gives a really nice rounded, obviously it's a good news story. So, and possibly some feedback to business groups generally. I don't mean specific individuals, but you know, just something to say, look, this we really got our act together here to support the business community. Well done.
Chair, just to say, internal audit are looking mainly at the fraud side. I suppose I should speak to both chairs, actually, Councillor Hunt. They're looking mainly at the fraud side in terms of the grants that have been given out, because there have been challenges throughout the country as to how much fraud is there in the system. And indeed, the government's own scheme, they appear to have had a damn sight more fraud than any local authority. But that's, I guess, another issue. The other aspect, of course, that Revs and Bens have had to deal with are inquiries that have come via MPs. And I'll say MPs because we do get them from a number that come into the area. I just think they've dealt with them brilliantly, so quickly, despite the obvious pressures that the team has been under. Is it 6 different sets of grants now that they've actually put into place? Something like that. And it's been quite amazing, and it's that liaison, and that's where customer services play such a vital part, to try and take away the work that they don't need to deal with. Get on with it, which is brilliant. That's the way it should work.
Well, maybe it should be, you know, business and customer support. You know what I mean? Really kind of up profile of it. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I have to say on a personal note that where I've dealt with residents' inquiries regarding the various business support grants, Revs and Bens and the finance team have been very effective at dealing with these inquiries. As is often the case, it tends to be when somebody doesn't qualify for a grant and there may be some mitigating circumstance to that. And as I say, yeah, they've been very good, very effective. I don't know if any other members have had a similar experience with businesses, or maybe it's just me that's more approachable. Who knows? But yeah, they've done really well indeed. So big thanks to them. The business community, definitely all than one, should we say, on the whole. Right, Councillor Brockbank, with your hand up, please.
Yeah, I've had a similar feedback from businesses. They've been very, very pleased with the speed of response and with the information that they've been able to get. The only criticism I've had from one person who didn't have email, and there aren't many businesses who don't have email these days, and this was just one person, but in the end we managed to get it sorted, but it was quite difficult, and as I say, it was only one person.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, well done.
Yeah, I think the terms agility and flexibility come to mind. But anyway, if we've got any more questions, members, before we draw this item to a close and move on to the work programme, any more? Nope. Right. Sharon, if you won't mind just bearing with us, move on to our next item, which is the work programme. Obviously, we've had a representation made tonight by Councillor Darville of the Sturton Norby Parish Council. I don't know how members feel. My instinct initially is to have a one-off meeting where perhaps Sharon could give us some sort of report or presentation based on the issues raised, because I don't think it's going to be quite, as has obviously become clear tonight, it's not going to be quite as clear cut as saying, oh, we'll have a working group, we have a magic wand and it'll all be better in the morning. I think it's there's going to be some nuance to this, and I think before we all set the terms of reference, it would be useful for members to get an understanding of what's feasible, bearing in mind the issues raised. Any comments, members? But firstly, Sharon, if we were to go down that route, do you think you'd be able to get something sorted for our meeting in April?
Yeah, so are you just wanting me to find out what the service standards are for each service?
Well, I think that's the starting point, and then what the scope is for delivering what's been asked of us. Because we've been asked to sort of scrutinise this, but I'm not really sure what. Without being too.
Yeah, well, I can look at service standards. I can ask each service manager what mechanisms they have in place for monitoring correspondent that comes into their service. So I can get you a bit of sort of background and overview as to what's happening across the council, and then you can sort of study that. I could actually, thinking about it, set up a bit of a mystery shopping exercise just to see what sort of response, and then bring that in part of the report as well. I need to think that through, but I could do something like that as well, and then you've got that overview and you can decide where you want to go next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm acutely aware that this sort of starts to fall under the remit of the lead member, Councillor Metcalfe, so it may well be the case that she gets involved.
Would you like to discuss it with her?
Yeah, I think if you won't mind. I mean, obviously, as I say, it's obviously without being too blasé, the end result is obviously better response times for customer services standards. But although it wasn't, without dismissing what was said, it wasn't specifically clear what the particular goal was. It was more of a generic statement, really, obviously based on an experience that the councillors had. Councillor Brown, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think it might be a more fruitful meeting if we had a presentation on the alternative tools available to us to do this kind of oversight. I was going to suggest mystery shopping is one of those tools, but there are a range of techniques that organisations use to see what's going on once you've got beyond reception. And I'm just wondering whether anybody would be able to do us a presentation of what the options and choices are. And we want something obviously cheap, quick and cheerful, and it may simply be that mystery shopping is it, but I don't know what the other alternatives are, and I think it wouldn't be wise to go through an April meeting without at least hearing those.
All right, Sharon, any views on that?
Well, there are, I think I'd need to review it. I don't know each service inside out in terms of what monitoring or what systems they have in place. So it's difficult for me to comment. With environmental health, it's very straightforward because they have iDocs and everything's logged on iDocs. So you can you can present quite a comprehensive picture. In other services, I'm not really aware, so I'd need to do some further investigation. To be perfectly honest, I can't see that we will be able to justify investment in another system just to monitor response times, response rates across the service, a whole council system.
Yeah.
We're going to go through local government reorganisation, and what we've got in place, I think, has worked in the main. And I think you need to distinguish between if there is an issue in a particular service, and we are aware of obviously the planning peer review and the issues that were identified there. That doesn't necessarily extend to the rest of the council. So I think you need to be sort of measured in your response as well. I
think that's why with this initial conversation, this initial meeting would be quite beneficial, because clearly, as you say, the different elements of the council running different systems maybe have different statutory duties or not in terms of response time. So it would just give members a little bit more scope as to what we realistically can do. I just don't want to set any hairs running and then find that actually we're promising something that we can't do, or it's such an onerously large piece of work, it wouldn't be sensible to go down that route. But all due respect to Councillor Garber, we do need to, do what we can to look at this. Councillor Brown waving his hand.
Just very quickly, what I was suggesting really was not that we didn't put in place a major alternative monitoring system, but that at our meeting we had on the table some suggestions of what might be realistic, what might be possible, because otherwise we're working with a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely point. Absolutely point. Councillor Hull, unmute yourself, please.
Mice on my desk. I'm trying to use 2 computers, so it's very difficult. I'm just wondering, obviously it'd be quite dangerous to go back to all parish and town councils and so on, but what we don't have a feel for is whether there's particular issues that were reported earlier on, or whether there's a widespread feeling about certain areas can't get in touch with. I don't know. It just feels, why would we focus in? I know she's coming on to talk to us this evening before we know this is a generic problem, because it may just be something about some misunderstandings, if you like, down at Sturton. I've no idea, but we don't want to set too many hairs running yet, do we, until we are clear there is a problem to worry about.
I think it possibly has been motivated by an individual's experience, but let's just see if there's a problem. I've got Sharon and Paul both wanting to speak, so you can toss a coin and decide who speaks first. Sharon.
I was just saying, sorry, I've jumped in there. I think we do monitor the complaints that we receive as well, and that is an important way of getting a feel of what's going on within in terms of individual services and response times, because if someone is very upset in terms of an officer hasn't got back to them or there's been an issue, then they sort of tend to put a complaint in. So we do monitor on a regular basis the sort of complaints that are coming into CDC, and that can give you an indication.
Right. Paul?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, because we do get the complaints from far and wide, and it's quite interesting if you just look at where the majority of complaints, which service they come from. Yeah, I won't say any more than that. I think if I look at what comes through my inbox and my mail, again, it tends to be very much focused on one particular service, and then another service, and that's waste management, when they were introducing collection points. You know, when there's specific issues going on, then it ratchets up the actual complaints you get, and that can delay as well the actual service they give, interestingly enough, because of the focus that they're giving to that introduction. So I'd be really concerned if, you know, I'm glad Councillor Brown said it actually, if we did look at introducing some mega IT system, because I'd struggle to justify that in my own mind, and certainly I couldn't justify it to the auditors. Who'd look at it very carefully. Why are you doing this with what is most likely 18 months of the authority left, in truth, by the time we got round to it? So I just think we need to be measured, and that is the key. Look at where the problem is, identify that. I think you'll find that the majority of the problem is within an improvement plan that's already been produced, and it's about focusing on that and making sure that that delivers. As I say, there is one other area which might be worth just a quick look to see how it is monitored, but those to me are the 2 key areas.
Yeah, I think certainly if Sharon can bring a report that articulates what we have and what we're dealing with here, I think that'll help members better understand what we can consider as a suitable response. You never know, we may come up with something that can be done, but as I say, I certainly don't want to set a major piece of work rolling at this time when there might not necessarily be an issue to deal with as such that isn't already being dealt with elsewhere. We don't need to name that service, but anyway. So are members happy with that idea that Sharon brings the report back to the 14th of April meeting, a one-off piece of work, and then if we decide, not that we're forced to, but if we decide there's more to be done, it can come after the elections or what have you. The form they may take or may not. I've got Councillor Brown and Councillor Hull.
I've got two other suggestions for work items. One we seem to have a thirst for in the first discussion, which is really homeworking, past and future. Yeah, I think it'd be useful if some part of the council committee structure took a look at what the executive thinks of has worked and what the executive thinks can be made to work long term. Yeah, we need some thinking about past and future. And I think I don't want to tread all over the executive decision making processes, but I do think it might be an interesting exchange of thought. The second one I suggest is there a case for us or for some other committee looking at building need post-COVID and what we've got, given that we're obviously going to use an awful lot less premises if people are working at home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of minded personally to think we need to get to the far end of this immediate period that we're in, so this might be something to put a flag in for next year, although I suspect the idea of rationalising our property requirements will be something that's never too far away from our chief executive's mind. So it may be a case of future to the converted, but nonetheless, we can put a pin in that for now and perhaps address that in the next civic year after May. Councillor Hull did have a hand up, but it seems to have gone down.
Yeah, yes, Chair. I was just going back to the previous conversation. Obviously, we moved on to new ideas now, so don't worry.
No, it's Councillor Brown who moved on. I was quite happy talking about the previous subject, but anyway.
Can I just say what I want to say? Just very simply, I wondered whether, in relation to the Sturton problem, a conversation between Sharon and the councillor would actually either identify something a bit more specific or relay. Because I think going through the report we've just gone through, you can't help but be confident. Sharon's not actually, no.
I know Councillor Darvill has been quite proactive in highlighting the concerns and personal experience, so that has been already looked at, or not so dealt with, but looked at, and that's part of the motivation for addressing us tonight. So I think it may well be a case of going forward there might be a conversation to be had between herself and the organisation, but for now she was raising the border point, however it was motivated. And that's what we're looking at, I think, is to just have this one-off meeting. So I'm getting the sense I've got a general agreement there. Sharon's had to leave us, but we'll thank her for her patience and attendance, retrospectively speaking. Any more?
Councillor Stable, if it helps, I'll attend that meeting as well, because I do have some thoughts on service performance and monitoring thereof. And you might be able to help me in that process as well. So thank you.
No, absolutely fantastic. That'd be great. As I say, get Councillor Metcalfe there, get yourself. Yeah, it would make sense. It almost looks like joined up working. Who knew? But right. So, any other suggestions for the work programme, members? I've got Councillor Shuttleworth with his virtual mitt in the air.
It wasn't about other subjects for further meetings, Chairman. I've got to say I was quite heartened by what I think it was Sharon said about a standard or a par for service level response of 3 working days, which I am sure even a simple acknowledgement and an undertaking to look into the matter relayed to the inquirer or complainant would help appease a lot of concern that I find very much. If I send an email to somebody asking a question, they don't respond within 2 or 3 days, then my concern increases. If they do respond and say, we acknowledge what you say, we're looking into it and we'll get back to you, it does calm the situation, and I'm sure it will reduce the level of complaint, the number of complaints, provided the situation is explored further and ultimately a solution or a suggestion brought forward.
Thank you. Devil's advocate. Councillors, do we have anything like this in mind? Do we respond within 3 days to an email inquiry, even with a holding email? I'm not going to ask you all to sort of say yes, because we all say we do it perfectly, I'm sure. But it's just to put the question out there. You know, it's something that maybe we could consider as part of this. Should we say this next meeting? Something that we could put out among members, just to suggest it. I have a feeling that our chief executive's got some words to say on this matter.
Oh, I was going to say, Councillor Stavely, you may say that. And how do you monitor that, please? As you've just asked me.
Well, that's it. As I say, I think it's something that we'd have to take as read, and it's a similar quandary to the one that we have with the different departments. How do you monitor it, other than just to have somebody's word that they'll do it? But it might highlight an interesting generic recommendation that we could make for our fellow members. Obviously, we're all doing it absolutely perfectly and responding in within 72 hours, as we're suggesting that anybody else should. But anyway, Councillor Brockbank, you've got a virtual hand up. You're going to tell us that Planning doing it all perfectly, are you?
Yeah. Well, no, don't go there. There is in the members is it our code of conduct, or in something that we receive when we first become councillors, that says that we have to log into our emails. I'm not. It's not. It doesn't say at least once a day. It's so many times a week, I think. So if we are going to consider that we have to that we want to respond within so many days, then we might need to change that as well.
Yeah, but as I say, it's just a thought, just to put it out there, that perhaps we should live by the sword, die by the sword, and maybe we could also throw in a recommendation. You know, admittedly, as I say, it's not something that we can tie people down to, because we can't monitor it effectively, I doubt. But you know, we should make some sort of consideration of that. But anyway, so we've got a meeting on the 14th. We've got the 17th of March Building Control Working Group. Right. So I think if that's everything, we can consider this meeting brought to an end, unless there is anything else that any members would like to raise. No, I'm taking that as a no. Right, I'll call this meeting to an end. Thank you for your attendance, your time and patience.